Here's the defending champion from last year's U.S. Nationals from Dallas, Texas, Kenny Bernstein. And the point standings have Bernstein just barely behind Joe Amato in the season-long series. Less than 100 points separate those two.
And you earn 200 points for every round-winning competition. Four-time Winston champ Joe Amato has had, well, a very difficult week, and he qualified only 13th in a 16-car field. This was earlier today in round number 1. Joe was up against Ed McCullough. You see the tire smoke there? Joe Amato was out of Indianapolis early.
It started off a little weak, and it ended up first-round loser. You know, all we can pray now is somebody can take Bernstein out of the cars behind us, and we don't lose so much ground here.
Now, Doug Herbert could prove to be Amato's best friend here in round number 2, Steve.
You're right. If Herbert can beat Bernstein, he prevents Kenny from taking the points lead. Herbert is only 24 years old from North Carolina, currently 9th in the points. He beat Scott Coletta in round number 1 at 493. That is Herbert on the far side of the racetrack. Kenny Bernstein in the near lane. A lot riding here for Bernstein. But Bernstein has a problem, is falling back. Doug Herbert has beaten Kenny Bernstein on Kenny's 48th birthday. He blew out the candles on that cake prematurely, as far as Kenny is concerned. So Joe Amato's got to be liking Doug Herbert right now, Joel.
You better believe Joe Amato loves what just developed with Doug Herbert taking it. That is Don the Snake Prudhomme. Now, Don Garlitz, do you think the changing track conditions affected that last run?
I certainly do. I talked to Dale Armstrong, Kenny's crew chief, earlier. He said they were going to step the car up. They felt the track could hold it. It didn't. You saw the car shake. Kenny had to backpedal it. He lost.
We're ready for our next matchup in round number 2 of the top fuels in the near lane. The Snake, Don Prudhomme, getting ready for Ed McCullough in the far lane.
The fact that McCullough beat Amato shouldn't be a big surprise to us. He's won 5 times here at Indianapolis, all in funny car competition. Just this year he switched to top fuel. Prudhomme is a 6-time winner, 3 in top fuel and 3 in funny car.
Doug Herbert elated over the victory over Kenny Bernstein. Don't forget at the opposite end, though, Kenny Bernstein could not capitalize on that first-round loss by Joe Amato. With more, let's go down to Steve.
Well, obviously a terrible time to have the performance fall off. You could have regained your points lead.
Yeah, we sure could have. It's a shame, but that's part of the racing. Dale and Wes, the guys worked real hard. It just shook real hard out there, Steve. I got off the throttle and got after before it knocked the tire loose, but it just wasn't enough.
Thanks, Kenny. And Joel, the fact that the sun has come out and warmed things up didn't help any.
So we're ready now. Don the Snake Prudhomme on the near side, and Ed McCullough, who blew away Joe Amato on the far side.
And you notice that wing on McCullough's car is not the right sponsor. Well, that's Kenny Bernstein's wing. They borrowed it this morning from Kenny when they discovered a crack in their own wing and felt it wasn't safe to run. Had no trouble doing that, being Amato was McCullough's first competitor.
McCullough could have borrowed his whole truck and trailer. Prudhomme loses traction. Ed McCullough goes to the Final Four with a 490, 293 miles an hour to the delight of his crew chief, Lee Beard.
Another great run for Ed McCullough. He's on his way to the semifinals for Don Prudhomme. An early turnoff and an early trip home. Continues, and it's the kid against the veteran, Eddie Hill and Tommy Johnson Jr.
Eddie Hill may be the world record holder. He may be low qualifier here, but he is in top because Jim Brissett, the crew chief for Tommy Johnson Jr., engineered a 4.88 second elapsed time, a career best for the young man in round number 1. Eddie Hill knows that. Tommy Johnson Jr. out of Ottumwa, Iowa. He is only 22 years old. He beat Rance McDaniel in round number 1 with that 488. Eddie Hill, we told you, he's a senior citizen in this sport. He beat Jack Ostrander in round number 1 at a 489. So the two Don Garlitz are 100th apart coming in here.
I think that makes it tough for both cars, Steve, because either one could smoke the tires because this track is warming up from the sun. The traction is not here like it was earlier this morning.
That's right. All prior combinations are out the window now. A brilliant start by Tommy Johnson. He loses traction. Eddie Hill trying to catch him and cannot do it. A disappointed Ursi Hill and a elated team out of Iowa. Tommy Johnson Jr. had a hole shot before he left the starting line before Eddie Hill, and that's why he's the victor. 5.53 to a quicker 5.49. Hill left late and couldn't catch the kid.
Well, as we watch this replay, we see that Hill has some kind of a problem on the starting line. We see it drop a cylinder, the fog coming out of the pipe. The engine is not running properly. It causes him to fall back rapidly. Johnson, on the other hand, smokes the tires, and Hill's engine kind of comes back to life, and he almost catches the young man, but runs out of real estate.
So the upsets continue. Let's go down to the finish line with Steve.
3 lead changes in 5.5 seconds. Unbelievable.
Yeah, that wasn't pretty there, but I felt it smoked the tires 3 or 4 times. I was pedaling for all I was worth. I couldn't see him, and it paid off.
Indeed it did. He was having more problems than you were, but you stuck with it. Did you ever almost shut it off?
No, I never saw yellow, so I hung with her all the way. This is Indy, man.
Well put.
So first Amato, then Bernstein. Now Eddie Hill is gone. We continue with the top fuels now. And Corey Mack's ready to go. The young man from Anaheim, California, Corey McLenathan, and Michael Brotherton.
I tell you, Joel, you could have got some long odds this morning on the fact that Kenny Bernstein, Eddie Hill, and Don Prudhomme are all gone and will not make the Final Four. There is Ken Binney, and he has a lot of confidence in his driver, Michael Brotherton. They won their first race together just a month ago in Seattle, Washington. They beat Pat Austin in round 1 at a 4.88 seconds. I think that trend was maybe taken at Seattle right after the winner's circle. Corey McLenathan, what a performer this young man has become. From Orange County, California, he ran a 4.93 cycle lap time in round 1 and beat Shelly Anderson. And Corey Mack, Big Daddy, has had a pretty good balance on this racetrack.
Certainly has. He's not smoking his tires, Steve.
And Corey McLenathan blows away Michael Brotherton, and at the same time runs a 4.87, matching his qualifying time, something no other driver's been able to do today. And also interesting, after watching that race, both lanes are having their problems in keeping traction. Let's head back to Steve with a disappointed Eddie Hill.
This racetrack is really tough for the crew chiefs.
It really is, yeah. It's a tricky deal. It's a totally different track from what we had first round, that's for sure.
It's showing in the elapsed times.
Yeah.
A shocked Eddie Hill is gone from the U.S. Nationals. Let's look at the semifinal matchups now. And McLenathan will have lane choice. He had the quickest elapsed time in the previous round, going up against Doug Herbert. In the other semifinal, it's going to be Ed McCullough and Tommy Johnson Jr. McCullough will have lane choice. Let's head down to Steve again with Corey Mack.
Corey, wow, 487.
Really?
Yeah.
We've been looking for it. You know, we had a little bit soft first round and second round. After Brotherton and those guys ran that 88, we knew we had to pound her, and it got hot. So we put some gaskets on it, a little bit here and there, and we did good. Jimmy and the team, Mac Attack, everybody, I don't know what to tell you about them.
That was a brand new motor this morning. I think you wore the shiny off at that time. I love the smoke of it.
I'm afraid so. But I mean, you know, to beat these guys up, I'll do what it takes to make it to the final here.
That seems to be a thread through this whole event, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Now over to the funny cars. Cruz Pedregon in round number 2, ready to face Gary Bolger.
John Force is scared to death of Cruz Pedregon in that red car. Cruz won the last event on the tour in Minnesota just 2 weeks ago. He's red hot. And on paper, anyway, he's got a fairly easy draw here in Gary Bolger. All right, let's check on the Winston points in the funny car category. You can see Force is on top. But what's interesting here, he had a huge points margin, and now Cruz Pedregon has narrowed it up. That win at Brainerd, consistent performances the last 6 races. John has every reason to be just a little bit psychotic about that car. Cruz has won 2 national events this year. We talked about Brainerd, Minnesota. He also won Houston. He beat Cole Smith in round 1 here with a brilliant 5.17. Gary Bolger has never won anything, but he has more fun than any driver in the pits, Don Garlitz. They're always laughing. He and Dale Creasy, you see right there, taking a look at the oil pressure gauge. They just love the drag race.
And he's in the top 10. So what can you say?
Absolutely. Everything he owns, including his trailer, would fit into Cruz Pedregon's trailer.
Well, Gary Bolger races like the old days, Steve. He does match races. He's just having a lot of fun out here.
That's right, and he's staying with Pedregon. Look at this. Pedregon outpowers him on the far end, but that man, Larry Meyer, crew chief for Pedregon, got a real scare. A 5.18 to a 5.40, but a hole shot for Bolger made it look closer than it really was. Let's go to Don with Larry Meyer.
Nice, strong 5.18, Larry. Looks like you got a hold of that track just right.
Well, we weren't looking for that one. Let me tell you, that was scary. We backed off on her a little bit because we was worried about the track. I don't know where that power came from. Must have had her stored up somewhere, huh?
Sometimes you slow them down, they actually speed up.
You're absolutely right. We've had a little motor trouble. Maybe it's just happier. Thanks.
So now Cruz Pedregon sets the tone for John Force and the rest of the field in the funny cars. He advances. We'll be right back to Indianapolis.
You want some speed?
Garlitz. And let's continue with the funny cars. Chuck Etchel's on the line, ready to go.
And the body is up, Big Daddy. What are they doing on the Etchel's car?
Maynard Yates is making some fuel adjustments. They run a little different fuel mixture for the burnout than they do for the actual race, and now they're putting it in the race mode.
Well, Gordon Mineo in the near line, their opponent, he is ready to go as he moves towards the starting line. For Gordon, this has been the worst and best of seasons. He had a runner-up finish in Houston, then melded a car to the ground in Seattle. Chuck Etchels, 2 wins this year. He beat Wyatt Radke in round number 1 with a 5.27 second elapsed time. Every car left in funny car competition is a potential winner. They are all killer cars with great performances from the earlier rounds.
And you know, Steve, these cars have much more difficulty getting a hold of the track. It's much more of a problem to get the clutch right because of the short wheelbase.
Oh, they both hook up here. Minio trying to catch Etchels, and he cannot do it. Chuck Etchels, a sensational performance. 5.18 seconds at 282 miles an hour. Minio trails at a 5.44. So Chuck Etchels advances. He is still in the thick of this points fight.
And now John Force knows he needs to pick up those 200 points, advance to the next round, because Cruz Pedregon just beat Gary Bolger. He is closing in on the top spot. It's held by Force.
Something else, Joel. John Force is set back there in the staging lane. Watch the 2 cars in front of him, Pedregon and Etchels, go 5.18 in that lane. He knows he can really stand on it.
But John has got some tough competition. Don't undersell Johnny West, a true hot rodder. He can build an entire car, the engine, the chassis, the body, everything. A real throwback to the days when everybody did that. John Force has 4 wins this year. He beat Englishman Norm Wilding in round 1 with a fairly conservative 5.22. Now, Johnny West out of Phoenix, Arizona, he beat Tom Hoover with one of his best ones ever, a 5.29.
And Steve, that's only 7/100ths off the elapsed time of John Force. So John Force is going to have his hands full here. And before we see the race, let's meet with the winner from the last one.
Chuck Etchels says, Cruz, I'll see your 5.18 and match it. Wow, to the thousandth.
Is that right? Yeah. How about the mile-an-hour difference, Steve?
He is going to have lane choice based on his 289.
Well, I think Maynard Jenks is about good enough where it probably doesn't really matter a whole lot. And we're just happy to be there. Indy's the biggest race of the year. I mean, what can you say about it?
I think that will be the race of the year when you two get together.
Well, let's hope we win it.
Chuck Etchels is ready. He's on his way to the semifinals. Now will John Force make it to the semifinals, going up against Johnny West?
Every racer will tell you, including John Force, you try not to race the other car. You try to race the clock and the track, but you can't do it. Not when you're as emotional as John Force, but John's got a huge lead over Johnny West. John Force, his second consecutive 5.22 second elapsed time at a speed of 274 miles an hour. John Force, though, may have to step it up for the next round. Let's go to Don Jarlitz with his crew chief, Austin Coyle.
Austin, I got to ask you, and you look up there at that board and you see the 2 cars in front of you run 5.18. Does it just let you know there's plenty of track out there and you can really get after it?
Well, it certainly does, but we tend to not try to play it too close to the edge, as that cost us the race 2 weeks ago.
And Austin Coyle is referring to that race a couple of weeks ago in Brainerd, where they smoked the tires in round number 2. Cruz Pedregon went on to win that race and continued to close in on John Force in the season-long point standings. Well, they both pick up victories in round number 2, moving on to the semifinals. And let's head back to the starting line for our next race.
And you're looking at Chuck Worsham, a truly gifted crew chief, lining up his son, Dale Worsham, one of the bright young drivers in the sport. And they are up against a real toughie in Al Hoffman. Hoffman over on the far side, that is his wife, Helen, who contributes so much to this team. And there is Tom Anderson, their crew chief, who has led this team to 3 national event wins this year and picked up $50,000 yesterday in the Big Bud Shootout. His opponent is just 22 from California, Dale Worsham. You saw him as runner-up to Chuck Etchels earlier this year on NBC Sports at the Summer Nationals. All right, Worsham in the near lane, Hoffman in the far lane. Big Daddy, I don't think there's a lane advantage. Do you?
No, sir. Both lanes have equal traction. You can smoke the tires in either lane.
Everybody is essentially on the same racetrack then. Okay, Hoffman is ready. Worsham is in. Like Hoffman won? No. Back at the starting line, and his lane on the electronic Christmas tree glows the red light. That means that he moved too quickly, trying to get a starting line advantage. The tree caught him. Hoffman is disqualified. Worsham wins it at 5:32.
And we have our semifinal pairings now in the funny cars. Del Worsham against John Force. Force will have lane choice. And the other semi, it's Cruz Pedregon and Chuck Etchels. Pedregon will have the lane choice, but just barely in that matchup.
As we move into the Pro Stock semifinals, they may not make 5,000 horsepower. They may not register on the Richter scale, but the fans love them. They're very sophisticated race cars. The closest thing to a street car you'll find in the pro categories. There is Larry Morgan, and there is Don Beverly. About 1,300 horsepower on gasoline. Let's check the Winston points currently. Warren Johnson has a huge lead. He'd have to retire to not win this season's championship. Scott Jeffrey on the #1 qualifier here at Indy is in the #2 spot. Now, Don Beverly has won 2 races this year, Atlanta and Denver. He leases a car from Warren Johnson. Larry Morgan has won the U.S. Nationals, in fact, just recently in 1990. We talked about Scott Jeffrey on a little bit earlier, the #1 qualifier in the Dodge Daytona. Well, let's go back to round #2 earlier today. It was Jeffrey on in the far lane, the car to beat, and Larry Morgan in the near lane. We rode along with Scott Jeffrey on. We all thought we were going to win with him. Boy, did we ride the wrong horse. Larry Morgan, 190 miles an hour in 7.29 seconds. I always love to talk to a driver right after he scored a big upset. Larry Morgan, tell your millions of fans how you beat the low qualifier.
I guess I was luckier than he was. I shook the tires, and I'm sure he told me he blew through the clutch. It's just one of those things. The guy that gets down this track will be the winner. It won't be the guy that has the most power.
So now Larry Morgan, after eliminating Scott Jeffrey on, ready for Don Beverly in the semifinals.
Unlike the Nitro cars, at the starting line, these engines just scream. 5-speed transmissions. They drop the clutch and they're gone. The giant killer Larry Morgan, by virtue of a better starting line reaction time, beats Beverly, a 7:32, Axis a 7:24.
So Larry Morgan on his way to the finals in the Pro Stock. Just a couple of minutes. It's the semis now, though, in the Pro Stocks.
That's right. The second half of the semifinals. That was Warren Johnson you saw burning out. And this is his opponent, Lewis Warden. Lewis, who, you say? Well, let me tell you, Mr. Warden is the talk of the pits. He beat Bob Glidden in round #1. He's from the metropolis of Festus, Missouri, driving a Chevy Beretta. Warren Johnson, as we told you earlier, he is leading in the points. He has been the hottest car of this entire event. And he's the quickest car left in competition now that Scott Jeffrey on is out. Very critical how they stage these cars. You just want to barely get into the beam so that you don't unintentionally red light, as we saw Al Hoffman do earlier.
You know, the reason Lewis Warren is running so good, Steve, is he's got the master engine builder, Grumpy Jenkins, working on the car.
Truly a legend in Pro Stock. Warren Johnson near lane. Ooh, a great start by both drivers. What a super race Lewis Warden gave Warren Johnson, but it's WJ at a 7:21, a huge speed of 192 miles an hour. Warden right there at a 7:25.
So we have our final pairing now in the Pro Stocks. The veteran and the point standing leader, Warren Johnson, against Larry Morgan, and Johnson will have lane choice. Over to the Top Fuel semifinals now. Tommy Johnson Jr. and Ed McCullough. And earlier we saw the help that Tommy was getting from his dad, Tommy Sr. Well, the crew chief is Jim Bursett for Tommy Johnson Jr. But wait a minute, is he really the crew chief?
The crew on Doug Herbert's car is being directed by Jim Brissett. But Jim is also listed as crew chief on the Tommy Johnson Jr. car. They're both still in. How are you handling this?
It's pretty tough sometimes, but, you know, as your ego would have it, he'd love to do anything to do something like this. Is great for me.
Now, what if these two drivers meet head-to-head? What's your priority?
Well, I have to go with Herbert because that's my main thing. But, you know, gee, what can I tell you? I have to go with Herbert. Johnson's my pal. I love him, but...
And root for a dead heat.
There you go.
Difficult dilemma, to say the least, for Jim Brissett. Well, Tommy has his hands full before worrying about that final with this man right here, Ed McCullough. Big Daddy, have you ever heard of that? One crew chief for 2 teams?
No, I haven't. Not in Top Fuel because there's too much work. So what it actually boils down to, I think that Brissett comes over to Tommy Johnson Jr. kind of like a consultant.
I think he reads the computer printouts and tells them what to do based on those. Ed McCullough in the 4 lane, Tommy Johnson Jr. Lee Beard has tuned the Ed McCullough car to a brilliant 487, a huge speed of 292 miles an hour. Johnson Jr., a great job though today. Let's go to Don with Lee Beard.
487
487, nice smooth tuning.
Well, it's been awfully consistent today. I'll tell you, though, I got a little miss in my heartbeat here. Last year, I was in the final rounds of this race, and I came here with a rookie driver, and we blew the blower off in the final. But this year, I got the 5-time champion, seasoned veteran. He's smooth.
And Lee Beard referring to Pat Austin, who overrevved the motor during the burnout against Kenny Bernstein in last year's final. Blew his engine out before the race ever began. Let's join Steve now with Ed McCullough.
There is something about this race that over the years has always brought out the best of Ed McCullough, 487.
Steve, that's great. You know, the weather's coming our way. The racetrack's getting better. We're just so happy to have this McDonald's car in the final round, and there's nothing I'd like better than to win my first U.S. Nationals in a top fuel dragster right here today.
So Ed McCullough has his spot in the finals. Now who is he going to be facing? We're ready for our next semifinal pairing. Corey McClenathan and Doug Herbert.
And Doug Herbert now has the full-time attention of that man, Jim Brissett. And he's going to need it, Don Garlits. Corey McClenathan, I feel right now, is the car to beat, regardless of what McCullough's run.
Well, he just ran a 487 in the previous round. He's got to be tough. He knows how to get down this racetrack without smoke.
That's right. He's young. He's got great reflexes. Very hungry team. The past on one race this year, it might be way up in the standings. Oh, and just as I say that, up in smoke goes Corey McClenathan. And Doug Herbert will meet McCullough in the final round with a 491 at 296 miles an hour. Something obviously went wrong in the clutch department for Corey Mack.
So the final is set now in the top fuel division. The veteran Ed McCullough going up against Doug Herbert. McCullough will have the lane choice. Welcome back once again to the 38th annual NHRA U.S. Nationals. Joel Myers along with Steve Evans, Big Daddy Don Garlits. There's Larry Morgan's wife Diane along with Nicholas on the left, and there's Austin on the right. And we get back to the starting line now. It's the funny car semifinals. Del Worsham against John Force. Will it finally be the year for Force?
Well, Joel, one thing crew chief Austin Coyle hasn't had to do with the Force car, and that's set up an overpowering combination. Not if you look at the times that Del Worsham, Captain Vice Robert Chuck, has been running. They've been mired in the low 530s. And Don Garlits, that is not enough. To find a 10th these days is very hard.
Yes, it is. But I'll tell you, Austin's very serious. We saw him earlier physically working on the clutch himself. He didn't have it relegated to some crewman. That tells me he's very concerned about this car's performance.
The car is shaking violently. Force loses traction. John Force will not win this U.S. Nationals. And Del Worsham and his father Chuck, they found that elusive 10th I talked about. They whittled their ET down to a 521, and that's competitive. And after a decade of trying, John Force will again leave here singing the U.S. Nationals blues. Let's go to Don Garlits.
Chuck, you might have backed into that round before, but you didn't back into that one with no 521.
No, we got a little bit lucky. We found a magneto that was dead the round before, and the car had no power. So thanks to Doug Herbert and some of the guys, we got her fixed. Thank you.
So we have one car in the finals now in the funny cars. That of Del Worsham. Now we get ready for the next semi. Chuck Etchell's getting his car started. He'll be facing Cruz Pedregon. Pedregon in and ready to go. And if you were to ask these drivers what they'd want to take home more than anything else, it'd be a victory in the finals at the U.S. Nationals. It won't be for John Force. Let's go to Steve.
John, a long, tough weekend has come to a disappointing close.
The kid's a good kid. I'm just hot. That was a big one. I wanted it. We worked hard. We paid dearly for it, and I'm hot. It's
nothing you could have done.
Don't matter. Got to go back. Got to regroup. He ran a number. We didn't expect it, but our car just we've lost our consistency. We're in that 512. We're just going to keep pushing on that, and that's just drag racing. It's a long weekend for all my people at Castrol and Oldsmobile and Jolly Rancher, and that's just drag racing.
Indeed.
Nothing more to say for a very disappointed John Force, but as you can see, he's tipping his cap to the victorious crew of Del Worsham. Now back to the starting line for the next semifinal.
This has all the potential in the world of being maybe the best race of the day. Reinforce what Joel said earlier. These two come in with exactly the same elapsed time from the previous round. Oh, it's a honey of a drag race. Whoa! It is Pedregon. Larry Myers says, yes, that's my boy. A 5.15 second elapsed time. The second best in the entire entire meeting. Etchel's a very good 520. He had a starting line advantage to boot, and he made it close.
Well, Chuck Etchell makes a brilliant start. He knew that car of Pedregon was going to be tough, so he wanted to get all he could to start, and tough he was. He was only out in front of him for just a moment, and then Pedregon began to make a move and ran that really trick 515, which was the best run he made today.
You woke him up with a 515, but you had a fuel tank concern.
Yeah, we had a fuel leak. We put our other fuel tank in, it leaked also. But Steve, I'll tell you, this is the biggest win of my career. I can't be any happier now. I really want to win this race for the crew. Everybody doing a hell of a job. I've been a little sluggish on my reaction times, but I plan on picking that up.
What a rocket ship this ride has to be.
Oh, it is. It puts you in the trunk, definitely. Pulls like a top fuel car. I think it is a top fuel car sometimes.
In disguise.
Well, he's in the funny car. It feels like a top fuel to Cruz Pedregon, and the young man from just outside of the Los Angeles area, he's in the finals going up against Del Worsham, and Pedregon does have the advantage. He's got the lane choice. And back in the pit area, Ed McCullough's crew, headed up by Lee Beard. They're getting ready for the finals in the top fuel, and when we return, we'll have the finals in all 3 divisions. The sun is beginning to set on the 38th annual NHRA U.S. Nationals in Indianapolis, and welcome back once again. There's a former champion here, Tom the Mongoose McEwen. He's in Doug Herbert's pit area watching the crew get ready for that big matchup with Ed McCullough in the top fuels. But right now, let's move over to the other division as we get ready for finals in all 3 divisions. And first up, it's the Pro Stocks.
And it's Larry Morgan up against Warren Johnson. And Don Garlett's Warren Johnson has publicly stated he's his own worst enemy sometimes off the starting line, either being a little bit late or a little bit too early in red lighting. But this is the U.S. Nationals. He's been right on his game all day long.
But so has Larry Morgan, and he's going to try and take advantage of that because, you know, the Pro Stocks, the starting line is everything.
Yep. All right, Warren Johnson has had an edge on all of the competition all day long in the performance department. If he can back that up with a good, solid driving performance off the starting line, as Big Daddy said, he could win his 2nd U.S. National, the last one coming in 1984. Morgan had the advantage. Johnson had the power. Warren Johnson, the U.S. Nationals Pro Stock champion, 721 to a 7.27. Johnson speed 191 miles an hour. Worthy of another look, Don.
Well, Larry Morgan took his advantage off the starting line like he planned, but Warren Johnson was very sharp on the lights also, so the advantage wasn't all that great. You couple that with the fact that Warren Johnson had more power. You can see the car moving very hard through the mid-range, and that with that 191 miles an hour, Larry Morgan could not make up the difference with reaction.
Let's go over to Steve.
You don't see a lot of emotion out of Warren Johnson, but when you win Indy, a statue becomes animated. Great job.
Oh, Indy, I mean, this is everything that you work for all year long, including the championship. We're not counting on a championship yet, but Indy, I mean, this is the race to win.
What a great race with Larry Morgan, both off the line. You had a little bit of an edge.
I told you that this race is, everybody works their butts off. Everybody deserves to win, but unfortunately, only one person can win this thing.
And you did it. Congratulations again.
Thank you very much, Steve.
So the U.S. National Champion of the Pro Stock Division is Warren Johnson. He's had a phenomenal year as he's been running away from the field all season long. But Larry Morgan made a move to move into the top 5. Now it's time for the funny car finals. It's going to be Cruz Pedregon of the car you're looking at right now, with crew chief Larry Meyer looking on. And he's facing Del Worsham. We saw earlier Del's father Chuck orchestrating things. But the real success story this weekend is surrounding the owner of the car you're looking at right now. It's been an incredible U.S. Nationals for Larry Meyer. And so far, it's truly been a dream come true.
You were looking at the top fuel dragster of Ed McCullough being readied for the final round. This is one of the most amazing scenes I've ever seen in all the years I've been around this sport. Here is the funny car of Cruz Pedregon, also being prepared for final round competition. And this is the man that owns both cars, Larry Meyer. This is the drag racing lotto.
Steve, this is just amazing that both cars are running this good. You'd think that you had the same crew chief on both cars, but you got completely separate crews, two different crew chiefs. They're tuning the cars the way they feel they should run. They both have held low ET every round. They both picked up 300s the last round. It's just amazing. Of course, this thing isn't over yet, and you know, we got one more round apiece, and it's going to be tough.
I know it's going to be tough. And ladies and gentlemen, right there with his back to you, that is the President and Chief Executive Officer of McDonald's, Ed Renzi's, getting his hands real dirty.
I love it. They've got the CEO, Ed Renzi, cleaning things up in the pit area and helping out as well.
If Cruz Pedregon wins the U.S. Nationals in his rookie season in a funny car, just be glad you don't work for John Force. There's not going to be any days off in that camp.
And those days will be 14 to 18 hours, Steve, every one of them.
That's right. There's only 4 races on the tour after the U.S. Nationals, which is a total of 16 rounds of racing. If Cruz can win here, he'll only be 2 rounds behind fourth. Del Worsham, he wants the prize money, almost $80,000. And Worsham smokes the tires, tries to backpedal it, cannot hook the car up. Larry Meyer, you, your team, and your brilliant young driver, Cruz Pedregon, have won the U.S. Nationals.
That incredible success story continues for the car owner. You're looking at him right now, Larry Miner. He is 1 for 2. He could be 2 for 2 by the end of the day. Let's head over to Down now as he gets together with a very happy crew chief, Larry Meyer.
I'll tell you, Larry, it's one thing to run a real trick ET in qualifying, and it's another to bang them out one time after another going into the finals.
I'll tell you what, this deal's been a tough race. We put everything into it we could. This McDonald's Oldsmobile Minor crew, it's the greatest there is. We're going to start calling it Mom Racing. Thanks.
Mom Racing for Larry Meyer. We knew Cruz was happy. He told us earlier, biggest weekend of his life. Let's find out.
Cruz Pedregon is a very emotional young man. I don't think this is going to take a lot of setup words for me other than congratulations, my young friend.
Thanks. Thanks, Steve.
You polished it off with a 5:13, the best elapsed time of the day. What a way to finish.
Yeah. Well, I really owe it to the guys. You know, I need to get my chin up because my guys worked hard. Larry Meyer, in fact, even Larry Miner, car owner, pitching in. Even McDonald's president, Ed Renzi, Tom Dentise, everybody's pitching in. You know, those people, McDonald's people, are just like a big family, and they enjoy working on the car. And all the guys, Chris, all the crew, this is the best crew around, and I'm just so happy for them. I struggle a little bit on my reaction times, but like any athlete, I just had an off day today, but I'm glad I pulled it through.
Can McCullough make it a double for your team?
Absolutely. McCullough's as hungry as any person I've ever seen. He's focused. He will win this race.
Let's go watch.
So congratulations to Cruz Pedregon, picking up not only the U.S. National Championship, but don't forget more points. He continues to close in on John Force in the season-long series. Doug Herbert getting ready for the Top Fuel Finals. He'll be going up against the veteran Ed McCullough. That is all coming up as they bring the cars to the starting line. We'll be right back with the U.S. Nationals at Indianapolis Raceway Park. The day is coming to a conclusion, and so are the 38th U.S. Nationals. As we welcome you back to Indianapolis Raceway Park, Doug Herbert getting ready for the Top Fuel Finals. Can he slow down the incredible success story of owner Larry Miner? They already have a U.S. National Championship in the funny car division. Now they're going for one in the Top Fuels with Ed McCullough as their driver.
Both of these teams have tremendous assets in their crew chiefs. Lee Beard for that car, Ed McCullough, and Jim Brissett for Doug Herbert. And truly gifted crew chiefs, I've noticed over the years, don't think of the engines as just lumps of metal. They're living, breathing things with a soul and sometimes a mind of their own. They always refer to the engine as a he or a she, never an it. And both of these men fall into that category.
Well, Steve, that's also true of the crew. They think the same way about these engines.
Well, whenever all of us from NBC Sports come out to cover the NHRA at the U.S. Nationals, the other events we see each year, we always find intriguing stories and interesting people, like the young man you're looking at right now. He is a member of the crew for Doug Herbert, who will be facing Ed McCullough. To watch him work, it is truly one of the more amazing stories we've seen over this weekend. Earlier, Steve Evans had an opportunity to talk with him.
Here in the Doug Herbert pits, you're looking at the one they call wheels. Pete Wachowski. He was put in that wheelchair by an automobile accident at the age of 16, but it certainly has not diminished his love for cars and competition. Pete, our cameraman can't keep up with you today. You're hot.
That's why they call me Wheels. Hot Wheels.
originally your paralysis was much worse.
Yeah, I was paralyzed from the chest down, and through the help of a chiropractor, luckily I'm not anymore. I can feel down to my knees and move my legs a lot more than I used to be able to.
How do you like Doug's chances?
I think they're great. Number one.
Okay, back to work.
Everyone should have a positive attitude like that, young man. We are ready now for the finals in the Top Fuels.
And Doug Herbert, like really every driver, they want to win for themselves, but they also want to win for their crews. And guys like Pete that work so hard in such long hours and beat themselves up to put these cars in a position like this. Ed McCullough, far lane. Doug Herbert, near lane. The finals of the U.S. Nationals in the fastest accelerating vehicles in the world. Top Fuel dragsters.
And will Larry Minor go 2 for 2 with his team today?
It's McCullough from by a car length. McCullough wins by a car length at 489, 286 miles an hour. Wheels, your day will come. That car is just too good to not win the big one. But today, here at the U.S. Nationals, that is the man that has earned the Top Fuel title. His first ever Ed McCullough. Even though he's won 5 times in a funny car, this one will always be special to him. Big Daddy, today the ace is the king.
That's right, Steve. McCullough took no prisoners. He left first and never looked back. The car performed flawlessly. They moved down track, and all McCullough does is just keep putting distance between him and young Doug Herbert. At the end, Doug Herbert made a valiant try with a 294 pass, but it wasn't enough.
What a day, what a race, what a life.
McDonald's in the final, both cars winners. All right. Steve, I'm just proud as punch to have this car in here. Our entire crew, the whole gang, both teams worked really hard. You know, what can I say?
You haven't driven a better race all year.
Steve, I love this race.
You love this track?
I love this track. I mean, I feel so good that to be able to win my first Top Fuel race here at the U.S. Nationals, I'm really proud to be able to do that, and to do it for Larry Minor and for McDonald's. And the U.S. Nationals is the biggest and the best of all time, and I love winning it.
I can't add a word to that except congratulations.
Thank you, Steve.
What an incredible weekend for that racing team. Ed McCullough, Cruz Pedregon, the winning drivers, for team owner Larry Minor. And with that victory, Ed McCullough moves into the top 6 in the Top Fuel division. He's up there and has a chance over the final few races of the year. Well, that'll do it for the 38th annual running of the NHRA U.S. Nationals from Indianapolis Raceway Park. I'm Joel Myers, along with Steve Evans and Big Daddy Don Garlitz. Thanks for joining us.
This is NBC's Sports World, and today it was brought to you by Mopar Parts and the Chrysler Plymouth, Dodge Truck, Jeep, and Eagle dealers who sell and install them. By Sony, where imagination and innovation create the ultimate in auto sound. By Craftsman, a line of 1,600 hand tools, made in America, guaranteed forever. And by Castrol Syntec, the new synthetic oil that protects in ways other oils can't.